All right, man. Well, the first thing I wanted to jump into was I actually got my blood work done recently, and I sent you an Instagram message, but you were taking a break for a little bit there. Um, so my test was at 500 nanograms per deciliter, and I was kind of disappointed because it's not super low necessarily; it's average. And I was looking into it. I was kind of comparing it to other people, some natural bodybuilders with really impressive physiques, and they had their testosterones were right around that range as well. Like some even people like Jeff Nippard got released some of his blood work a few years ago, and he had like 351, which is like quite on the lower end.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these guys had like 655. And yeah, well, I don't know if it's like something to be concerned about necessarily, but I don't really have any symptoms of low testosterone. And if 500 is supposed to be average, um, I'm kind of just curious to know your thoughts on that. I also, when I got the test, I did come off a pretty aggressive cut, but it had been like a week or two, and I had started to get my calories back up, and I'm wondering if that could have been an issue, and my baseline is actually quite higher than that. But what kind of what have you discovered when you take your own blood work and stuff like that? Like for me, like is 500 something to worry about in your
That's
opinion?
not anything to worry about. Like the
Yeah.
range, depending on the labs that your doctor or medical professional uses, the range is usually something like 270 up to
Yeah.
close to 1,000, 950. Some labs will go up
Yeah.
to 1,100 before they consider it too high. Just depends on what laboratories they use. So 500, is kind of right in the middle there. And that's a huge goalpost, right? So, and the other thing is that total isn't really the main factor. Like what you want to look at is free testosterone, and that's
Yeah.
that's the bioavailable testosterone that your body can actually utilize. So as long as you're in range there or close to the upper end, which is I believe about 4%.
Mhm.
Of what you produce, you're good. But yeah, we've got a lot of things going against us in terms of testosterone levels. But I think really probably you're looking at like just a normal healthy range at 500-600 ish, and then also the fact that you're an aggressive cut will tank your testosterone, and that'll take a while to come back.
Yeah, it
Um,
won't be like the next day you eat enough calories and then it's back up. It's gonna be
Exactly, right. Or any of these like lifestyle factors that we do to naturally increase testosterone, it it ultimately just comes down to being healthy. And then you say that to a person and they're like, well, I think I'm healthy. I'm like, well, look, this is multifactorial, right? It's not just I eat good and I exercise. There's so many different factors like sleep and stress management and environmental toxins and mindset and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you're probably fine. You got to remember, calorie deficit, especially prolonged ones, and you said the cut was aggressive. That's a stress on the body,
oh yeah.
right? And it's really common to see libido crashes
Yeah.
or guys like not waking up with a hard on in the mornings anymore towards the end of a cut.
Mhm.
So a lot of the questions I ask clients when we're cutting or dieting down for fat loss, it isn't just like scale weight and how do you look. It's really I'm kind of collecting biofeedback, right? So I'll
Mhm.
ask them, are you experiencing any like sexual dysfunction? Are you feeling any brain fog? Do you maybe not wake up with a boner anymore?
Mhm.
That's me kind of connecting the dots as to how they're doing. And as soon as a series of questions come back negative, or answers, excuse me, come back negative, that's a red flag. And the question is, at that point, how much further do you want to go and feel like shit for the sake of losing what, an extra three,
Yeah.
4, 5 pounds, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of that thing. But yeah, 500 is it's right there, kind of mid range.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do over the next few months is just optimize. Like I'm not going to be doing any cuts. Like I'm back on more of a calorie surplus right now, and I'm just going to try to optimize my lifestyle habits and see maybe like what do you think? Do you think like I was also going to ask you how often do you recommend like a guy in my position get blood work done?
How old are you?
I'm 28.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry about it too often. Once a year
Yeah.
is probably good for you.
Yeah.
It's the guys that 35, 40 plus, especially 40 plus. I get mine checked twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
I actually get everything checked twice a year. I'll do full blood panels. I'll even do imaging once a year, like calcium scoring for the heart and arterial plaque and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
You know, I'm on top of my health and my game, but you know, I lived a wild and crazy rough lifestyle for a very long time, and I find it hard to believe that you know, that didn't have some long-term effects on me. So maybe borderline hypochondriac with that, but it doesn't hurt. It's not expensive, especially with insurance. You know, there's lots of preventative measures to prevent any of those you know, negative health effects from just kind of getting older. But yeah, 28 years old, you know, once a year is probably good.
Cool, man. Cool. Yeah, I'm hoping, as far as fluctuations in testosterone levels, is it normal? As far as, you know, they say you wake up with a certain amount of testosterone, it tends to tank as the day progresses. But like how, like depending on when you get it taken, like how much are the fluctuations? Like 15%, like 30%? I'm kind of curious about that as well.
You know, I'd be lying if I, you know, told you that I know a definitive answer to that. Because I've actually heard the opposite as well. I've heard both ends of the spectrum, that men's testosterone peaks in the afternoon, and they think that tends to be why a lot of guys train better in the afternoon, and I'm a testament to that. Like today actually was just because we're filming this podcast and time crunch. I actually woke up and trained immediately, which I never do. It feels heavy. I'm dragging ass.
Yeah.
I'm still doing it, but it's just not. I'm not connected. That central nervous system isn't quite ramped up just yet either. So today was the first time in a long time that I woke up and rolled straight into my gym, and it was a challenge. And you know, does that have to do with testosterone levels? I don't know. But that fluctuation, yeah. I mean, if you tested 500 on one day and then did the next day, it's going to be a little different. To say, you know, exactly how much different, I don't know. Right? That would just require like really frequent testing. They're just looking for a range when they test things, just like with any other measurement. So
yeah, it's kind of another thing I'm curious about too, is you hear about the reference ranges, and I've heard, is it true that reference range has been getting lower and lower for men? So that's also another thing that concerns me. If it's like, you know, 500 is average, but what is that in comparison to where our levels were at, you know, 20 to 50 or even 50 years ago or 100 years ago?
Well, when they first started kind of discovering and tinkering with like testosterone and then eventually prescribing it synthetically, you know, they measured men's average testosterone at near above 1,000. And, you know, who knows how accurate that is, because labs do kind of change. But, you know, they measured it there. And, yeah, now it's like, okay, let's just move that goalpost a little bit, because we're seeing, you know, guys coming in at like 250, 300. I had a client a couple of years ago, and his levels were like 150. And that is like, that's very unhealthy, right? Just like very low testosterone is unhealthy, so is very high testosterone, right? You go up to 2,000 or higher, you know, maybe even 3. I know some bodybuilders that have levels tested and they've been in over 4,000, right? You're looking at, you know, shortened lifespan for sure if you continue that. But yeah, I think it is a concern, right? And it's not really talked about. And then you've got modern politics interjecting into all this shit. But you know, I had my levels tested probably 6 years, no, more than that, 7 or 8 years ago once. And I was working as a bouncer at a strip club while waking up and then going to my personal training job at a big gym.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was burning the candle at both ends, and my levels back then were like just like 315, I think. And I felt like shit. I didn't want to train. It was a task to do anything, think about anything. I was depressed. So, you know, that doesn't work for me, that low level, but it was in range technically, right? The doctor's like, well, you're in range, right? You should be fine. I'm like, what do you mean I should be fine? I have these other symptoms. And they're like, well, just eat better. I'm like, motherfucker, I eat great. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, try exercise. I'm like, look, dude, you don't fucking know what you're talking about here. Like, I've got this down, but I'm telling you, physiologically, there's something going on. And that, to me, that 315 level of testosterone is not sufficient for a man of my age. Back then, I was 32 years old or something.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for a guy that takes care of himself.
Yeah, and there's people that think, I'm kind of curious, what, in your opinion, what are the reasons for the tank in testosterone in modern men? Is it like there's the camp that thinks it's all the, plastics and phytoestrogens and stuff like that? Or is it just lifestyle? Like we're just too stressed and we're probably a combination of the two, maybe?
I was going to say, these things, along with lots of other, health issues, is usually multifactorial and accumulative, right? Coming from all different places. Heart disease, it's not just, the fact that you eat Taco Bell. It's probably other factors too. Maybe some genetics, maybe the fact that you don't move. It's a few different things, right? Same with this testosterone. So I wrote about that a little bit more in depth, and I wrote an ebook called The Testosterone Solution.
Yeah,
probably 4 years ago, and I went into that, and again, there's environmental toxins. There's a lot, and look, I've got a plastic bottle right here, right? You can't escape those, right?
No.
But you can do your best to minimize how much you eat from those things or how much you come into contact with them. You can buy better hygiene products, and there's just stuff in the air. There's things in your water. There's just stuff you can't control. So it's really important when you dive into that to understand that you can't control most of it. So because you tell people to eliminate toxins, and some people will get very neurotic about it and it'll start to ruin their life, creating more stress, right? And we're like, no, we're trying to reduce stress here. And you're freaking out about, touching your steering wheel or some bullshit, right? Or your mattress, right? Your mattress is really toxic.
Or receipts. Receipts is a big one.
Yeah.
Like
that is a true thing, right? But this receipts thing, touching receipt paper thing, it's true. If you handle it all day, you work as a cashier or something, or you make receipts or whatever. You probably want to wear gloves or find some other way to minimize that. But yeah, it's become this fad thing where people are like demonizing it, like never touch it, and just freaking out. These absolutes, since you don't want to be this fear monger and live in fear. So toxins, one thing. Stress, definitely. We live a lot differently. We're surrounded by blue lights, and we're not sleeping as good as we used to. We live a much different lifestyle. How people train. Some people don't exercise enough. Some people overtrain. Some people never listen to their own feedback, and they just continue to train even though they feel like shit. And you have to remember, we optimize our health while we recover. Same like, gaining strength or muscle. When we come back to homeostasis is when we're the healthy point, right? Not when we're in the stressed point, like through creating intentional stresses from training. So there's that. And then I think just the way we talk to ourselves and mindset, this is speculation, by the way. There's nothing that I know of that's studied on this, but certain mindsets that we develop, the way we speak to ourselves, and maybe even like younger generations with this modern push of extreme feminism, telling young men that they're they shouldn't be the way that they feel like they are, right? They shouldn't stand their ground or be assertive, or they shouldn't be like just basically boys. That probably has something to do with it a lot too. So you got lots of different factors. But you can do an assessment on someone and identify which might be at role the most, right? So an overweight person, hey, look, odds are your testosterone is low because you're carrying a lot of body fat, which aromatizes your testosterone levels into estrogen, right? Or a relatively lean person that has like super tanked testosterone levels, would look at how they manage their stress or their sleep, right? Or maybe even their diet. Who knows?
Yeah, the psychological warfare on masculinity could be having a chemical reaction. Like that could definitely be affecting our testosterone levels. I could see that for sure.
I think so, because look, people like you and I don't think it affects us. I'm just like, that's fucking crazy, and just ignore it because you're confident in your skills and your abilities and who you are, and you're not doing anything wrong. But I think the younger guy that might be influenced by these ideas and might not know otherwise, yeah, he's probably dealing with some kind of like emotional, psychological issues that he thinks are just normal.
Well, you talked about, you're very careful about your health. You're getting your blood work checked a lot because, you were touring in a band and you were living a lifestyle that was not conducive to health. And like, for me, like, I have a similar, no, I didn't do it for as long, but I had a similar experience. Like I toured in a band and ate like shit. And I probably did a lot of damage to myself. I've done, like, smoked a shit ton of weed, did a lot of drugs and shit like that back in the day. And I'm just wondering, like, how would my testosterone levels be if I didn't do that? Or how would this be now? So obviously you don't want to like think about that kind of stuff. But yeah, the stuff that, yeah, I remember falling for a lot of that shit when I was younger. And if I didn't have people the psychological, to take it back to the psychological warfare on men, it's like, if I didn't have people such as yourself or people like Jack Donovan, and if I wasn't connected to a community of like, oh, okay, these guys are sane, if I was just surrounded by this crazy shit all the time, yeah, I'm sure my testosterone levels would be even more, like, they would be tanked.
Hey, I can testify because that crowd and that scene, whatever, that tour network, I did that for over 20 years. Definitely a majority of them had those kind of ideologies that want to suppress basically people succeeding, right? Like, it's this equality bullshit. Like, you can't be doing better than anyone else, and you definitely can't display any kind of like aggressiveness, or you can't display any of your successes and make us feel bad, that kind of stuff. So, I definitely got wrapped up in that and just never really felt comfortable with it throughout, the majority of my 20s. And then, leaving that whole lifestyle and that scene, it was like liberating. It was very liberating. So I totally understand.
Awesome, man. Okay. I wanted to take it to a new topic here. And this is something that I've seen kind of floating around. So it's a meme. I can't remember the meme exactly, but many prominent science-based fitness and nutrition guys have shared it. It pretty much states that most people are incapable of doing their own research. And although I get that a ton of people don't know how to filter out bad info, there's definitely a bunch of, if you're just the average person, you're on Instagram, you're on YouTube, you see something, you're like, oh, the guy on YouTube told me, that makes sense. But I also feel like there's a bit of like a scientism, elitist mindset in the health and fitness space that annoys me. And I'm trying to be balanced, but it does get annoying sometimes. Like the idea that you need a PhD to adequately interpret data. I think that's a disempowering message. And I also find it funny because a lot of these guys will talk about, going on YouTube is not a good way to do research. Well, like, obviously that's not doing your own research, but then these guys will make YouTube videos interpreting data as a way to educate you. And I'm like, well then, okay, well, why are you making these videos? And I'm just kind of like, obviously there's tons of bullshit out there and there needs to be a balance, but what is your, you also posted something about, science getting a bad rep lately with everything going on in the world. And I'm just, but we shouldn't let that discredit the scientific method, good science. So I'm curious, what is the balance there? And what do you think there is validity in that you can't do your own research meme or concept? And, because we know a lot of experts are full of shit. So I'm just kind of curious, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, man, I love this question because I think about this a lot, especially lately. I've been writing about it and everything. So you're right, man. There's got to be a middle ground because we don't need people in lab coats telling us how to do everything all the time, right? And not every subject in health and fitness is thoroughly studied. So we're talking like getting lean or bodybuilding or whatever. You're probably going to be better off finding someone that's just really experienced in those fields. I mean, like, not just, oh, I've been lifting forever, but like actually maybe competitive level has helped large groups of people. So, or if I look at my example in terms of coaching, I've helped hundreds of people. For me, that's a lot of data. It's anecdotal, but it's a lot of stuff to consider. And in terms of doing your own research, look, most people just read headlines, and then they don't have this ability, at least in this subject. I shouldn't say they don't have the ability to do this in general, but at least on certain topics. One is extreme biases. So they'll skip through until they search something that makes them feel good about their belief systems, and they basically just want to be right.
Yeah.
They'll just read headlines and maybe just skip everything and then go straight to the conclusion. But when you go to interpret actual data, you have to understand again, it's multifactorial. There's like, are they double blind placebo? Are they meta-analyses or systemically reviewed? Is it just one study that has verbiage like this may indicate or may be correlated to, right? One of the first things you learn when you interpret data is correlation does not equal causation, right? So, 70s, red meat is correlated to heart disease, and everyone's like, oh, red meat causes heart disease. No, no one actually said that, right? It's just correlated to it, and then it's been gone back and been revised. Or things like testosterone replacement therapy, right? Hormone therapy. Old data says that it is linked to prostate cancer and cardiovascular disease. Well, fast forward to not too long ago, massive studies zooming in on multiple studies done on the same topic, which is called the meta-analyses or systemic review, went back and revised all that data, and they found zero links to cardiovascular disease or prostate cancer, right? Mm-hmm. So science does change, but yeah, there's a lot of power in thoroughly revised evidence, especially when it's like systemically reviewed and is done by teams of international scientists that specialize in these topics. But you don't want to just live in that, right? There's a lot of power to experience and anecdote as well, right?
Yeah.
Just common sense. So, some things that might make sense to some people, you got to be careful with how they articulate certain things. Like, this makes sense, therefore this is the fact. And if you go back and like, sometimes it just takes a quick Google search to find like a really big study on it. You can say, certain things that people claim are just absolutely not true. So people come up with these outlandish claims around things that just make sense.
So
like that too.
Your intuition only gets you so far, but there's also like this idea of like intuition should just be thrown away, because everything can be, we can't, especially when it comes to nutrition and fitness. Like, nutrition itself is so complicated because you can't control a huge amount of the population, these observational studies and stuff like that. You can't really unless you're getting people in a lab and you're making sure that they're doing exactly what you need them to do for your study. It's hard.
Yeah. That's the other thing, is how tightly controlled were the specimens or the subjects, right, in the study. Was it like a 10-year study and they just let people go off and like, hey, just do your thing and we'll just trust that you stick to this stuff, or, interpret this. If someone asked me to do something 10 years ago and then asked me to like report about it today, I wouldn't. I'm like, oh, I forgot about that, right? Even if they sent me an email every month, just a reminder, like it's, so you got to be careful with that. But nutrition's a big one. But at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Like, depending on what your goal is, I really try and simplify this for people as much as possible. And once you do that, they succeed, right? Once you get straight to the point of what matters most, cut through the clutter, people will succeed, right? It's when they're thrown all these different garbage ideas and biases that they get confused, and then they maybe try something for a week or two, and the scale didn't move, I'm gonna try this thing, and they try it for another week or two, the scale didn't move, I'm gonna try this thing. So who knows? Your camera just went out there. You good?
Yeah, don't worry about that. I haven't been able to figure that out. It just shuts off for like a second and comes back. Okay. Yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah, another thing with that is I don't know the specific, I can't remember the specific study, but there was a study on, training to failure versus training to, 3 RIR or whatever, something like that. And it's like, how do you know every single one of those people in the study were training to failure? There's just other variables that I always think about in studies. And I'm like, well, what is that? How does that translate into the real world? Because I remember when I first thought I was training to failure, when I didn't really have I couldn't gauge my own intensity. you know, I maybe thought I was going to failure, but now that I've gotten more experience and I understand how far I can push myself, it's like, no, that was failure. Like, you know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of,
Exactly. There's usually another study that goes along with something like that, like training to failure versus 3 RIR, which is reps in reserve, right? Is what it means. And it's basically like the RPE, the rate of perceived exertion.
yeah,
So 3 RIR, I'll put it in the category of like 7 RPE in the scale of
yeah,
RPE.
yeah,
But you know, then you go and look at like some other data. It's like, hey, actually, most people don't train to failure when they think they are, just like you mentioned.
yeah,
But here's the thing with that, and this is you know, kind of coming from like a periodized perspective in training, is that if you go straight to training to failure, you kick off like a new program, a new mesocycle or new routine,
yeah,
and you go straight to training to failure, you're already capping yourself off when you should be ramping up to cap yourself off later down the road, right? It's kind of like if you take a balloon and let it float towards the ceiling and it bounces off the top, it's just going to hang out there until it just falls back, right? If you go straight to failure immediately, especially as a natural lifter, you're not giving yourself a whole lot of room for growth, right?
yeah,
There's something called the minimal effective dose, right? And that's enough stimulus to create, to grow from, and you can still, you know, you can recover from it, you don't burn out, and you minimize your injury potential. And you can go through a minimal effective dose for a couple of weeks until you go into maybe like an accumulation phase to where, yeah, you're pushing a little bit closer to failure, going harder, maybe a couple extra sets, extra reps, whatever it might be, more weight, just more volume in general or intensity. And then you can go up and cap, right? But you can't live on the moon forever. You can't live in that peak phase forever, right? What goes up has to come down. And it's essentially what people are doing, and the people that want to argue this are they feel like they should be doing what these influencers are doing on social media, right? Their max effort lifts. They put all their best lifts on the internet. But you have to remember, if you're looking at an athlete and you see them at a strongman event or powerlifting event or like a peak phase in training, that's just a sliver of their year, right? They're not doing that all year round. Unless, of course, there are some freaks of nature out there. This is you know, another thing. It doesn't apply to 100% of everybody, right? But there's some genetic anomalies out there that can just hammer the shit out of themselves and be totally fine, right? And then, of course, there's people that use a lot of PEDs or anabolics, and they recover really quick, and they're generally pretty fine. And they can start a program or a mesocycle training to failure and just keep going, right? Because they're super enhanced. But yeah, essentially, that training to failure, leaving reps in reserve. I personally always kick off a routine leaving some reps in reserve because I'm coming off of a deload and I don't want to blow myself out of the water immediately. And man, I'll tell you, it works. It works for me. It works for the majority of my clients.
And yeah, no, I've definitely done that tactic, and I think I've taken it from the two extremes where I've been very well, I learned that from Mike Israetel. He's all about that, you know, like don't start your mesocycle just going balls to the wall right away. So I have done it that way. And then I've done it the way where I've like really pushed it and then been like, wow, I got where you almost just, you hit that ceiling so quick that like, you're not really progressively overloading because you've already hit it, you know? Yeah. That's
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's very subjective to me too. Like it's taken me a bit to kind of realize where my limits are and understand like, no, yeah, I shouldn't try to do another rep there because that rep's going to be an absolute grinder. And also, it's not going to give me room to grow for the next session.
No, exactly right. And you know, it is like a measuring period, right? Like you're still kind of figuring out like what is too much or not enough for you, and that takes time and experience, right? The other thing about this deload concept is you know, we can kind of schedule them for people or ourselves. But an example would be I schedule a deload depending on the client's training abilities, experience, and age, and how they're training. Every 4 to 5 weeks, maybe like on the 5th or the 6th week, they'll get a deload. And on one day, I'll get a message from them saying, hey, dude, like I was kicking ass last week. I feel great. And now it's all this like light stuff and like mobility work. Like what's up? Technique work. Like what's up with that? I'm like, well, hey, look, if you're feeling great, I'll just extend the routine, right? There's no point in like kind of taking that away from a person. But that being said, you want to be careful that you're not waiting for these symptoms of overtraining, under recovering to occur, right? The objective is to prevent it, not create it, right? So, you know, you're doing intense workouts multiple days a week, and at a certain point, your sleep starts getting disrupted, your libido tanks, which probably means your testosterone's tanking. Too much of a good thing is not a good thing, right? You get brain fog, the weights just feel heavier. That's a good indicator of when it's time to take a break. Is when those weights, it feels like somebody turned up the gravity in the gym. And that happens more than, you know, once or twice a week, and you're just dragging ass for like days on end. It's probably time to dial it back for, you know, 7-10 days or so, and just take active rest. You can be a normal human and still be healthy. You're not going to lose your muscle. Right? You might not get a pump for a week or so, and it might feel like it. It takes a lot to lose muscle, right? And even then, if you're lifting weights, you can go and just do body weight and bands to preserve any muscle and get a pump and kind of feel like you're working out, or just work technique. It's funny you mentioned Dr. Israel from RP Strength, because I was just speaking to one of their coaches, Jacob Reed, the other day about this very topic, on how, like, you know, we don't want to force someone to take a deload just because we think they should. You know, there's basic parameters and stuff, but like I said, if someone's just kicking ass and they're feeling awesome, just let them roll with it a little bit longer. You know, just educate them on the fact that sooner or later you're going to have to like take a light week, right? It's just for that continual growth. Also, there's training adaptations, right? So if you just do the same thing for too long, you're eventually going to adapt, and you're just kind of going through the notions. And then when you go to failure too long, let's clarify one thing. Failure is just until you can't perform the rep with good technique, right? Because mechanical tension matters greatly, right? So if you're going to failure and your reps just get sloppy and it looks like shit, you're moving terribly, that's beyond failure. That's like -1 RIR, right? That's gross. There's no benefit for that.
The muscles that are supposed to be working stop working, and the muscles that you don't want to be working take over.
Yeah, it burns, and you know, and yeah, especially with big compound lifts, squat, deadlift, bench, even overhead press. Going 0 reps to failure or 10 RPE.
It's a stupid idea.
It's a stupid idea unless you're competing, right? You're going to like a powerlifting meet or strongman competition. If you look at the elite lifters, right, super experienced national or international level lifters, they only max out and peak at competition primarily, right? And they usually ramp up to it in the ideal world, right? And I say ideal world because there's so many other factors in life that might take away from that. But it's if you look at peak training, athletes in peak phase in training on social media, and you think that you have to do that all the time, you're wrong. You're you're robbing yourself from so many potential gains.
That kind of takes it into the debate between volume and intensity as well. So there's you know, if I'm going to do 5, you know, I don't really use the RPE stuff because it's kind of like, I mean, I guess for myself, like I can kind of gauge that internally, be like, yeah, that felt like an 8 out of 10, you know, but if I do 5 sets, 7 out of 10 versus 3 sets, 9 out of 10, it's, I'm always curious, you know, where's the balance there, and how do you gauge that?
Well, it's going to be what the goal is, right? So as intensity goes up, volume has to come down, right? It's a simple fact. You know, deadlift, for example, you take 90% of your 1 rep max, that volume is very low, right? You're going to do what, a double or a triple, right? That's low volume. Whereas when you knock it down for hypertrophy and you go say, you know, 70, 75, 80%, which is kind of getting up there, that intensity obviously is down, right? So those two things eventually, if you're going from like a graph, I'm trying to see myself here, do a graph, you got intensity and volume, they cross each other at a certain point, wrong way, right? You know what I mean? They just kind of overlap. One goes up, the other comes down type of thing. So, you know, extra volume with low intensity, for example, like you mentioned, like a 9 out of 10 on RPE, and you did, you know, multiple sets of that, that's increasing your volume. But I honestly don't think it's that necessary. Like you're probably looking at, you know, less ability to fully recover from that if you do it for too often, right? If you look at like I remember when I did a couple powerlifting meets, you look at that kind of couple weeks before, like 10 sets of a single or 10 sets of doubles or triples or something, and then like big load for before. That's a lot of volume and really high intensity. That's not sustainable, right? That's that kind of peak phase before you go into competition or just want to peak in your training if you're not competing. So it's a good debate, but at the end of the day, as intensity increases, volume decreases, and vice versa.
Yeah, and it's pretty individual at that point too. You gotta, like multiple factors at play there.
Mm-hmm.
As far as you also, if you're training for strength or if you're training for hypertrophy, you're going to take a different strategy.
Yeah, and then there's like I said earlier, ideal world. There's this cool. Like we can look at this and we can map it out. But if you're looking at this and you want to do this, and you're a stressed out parent that works 6 days a week, and you have kids and you're not sleeping that great, that's probably not the best idea for you to do for very long, right? We should push those boundaries. I think everyone should push their boundaries, but it's all about education, right? And awareness, and kind of explaining these other factors that may hinder or enhance our progress in the gym or how we look and feel. So you gotta kind of zoom out and take this full spectrum approach to your health and fitness goals.
Yeah, that's interesting you brought that up, because there's this idea that I actually made a post. You commented on it. I don't know if you've heard of this guy on YouTube, The Bioneer.
I don't think so.
He does like a lot of it's really cool content. He does like a lot of functional training, body weight stuff. But his whole thing was, you don't need to do anything, right? You don't need to deadlift. You don't need to squat. Like, we choose to exercise because that's, any kind of exercise is better than not exercising. And there's this whole idea that if you're in the gym, like, oh, you gotta do conventional deads, bro. You gotta do back squat. You gotta do the bench. You gotta do all these things because that's what we do, right? Like, that's what bodybuilders do. And I made that post about, like, you don't really have to, as long as you're training movement patterns, you don't necessarily need to do, like, if someone wants to do a trap bar deadlift instead of a barbell, like a conventional barbell deadlift, it doesn't matter. He's training the hinge pattern, or if you're training a different kind of squat, if you exclusively do front squats, goblet squats, whatever, just as long as you're doing like, the push, pull, squat, hinge, rotation, all that stuff. The variation of exercise doesn't really, it matters, but it doesn't, you can choose the best variation for an individual structure's goals and preferences. And I'm kind of curious, like, what your take on that is, and how does that translate into your programming, both for yourself and your clients?
Yeah, no, I remember that. That's why I commented on it, because it was a good post. So, exercise selection matters greatly, right?
Yeah.
And a couple examples. If you want to get better at the squat, yeah, you should practice the squat, but sometimes it's the accessories that are also just loaded squat patterns that help you with that.
Yeah.
Right. Also, as long as you're doing a loaded squat pattern, loaded hinge pattern, push, pull, horizontal and vertical, and, a lunge pattern occasionally, and carrying something heavy. And then, this isn't very conducive to bodybuilding, but, some rotation, anti-rotation.
Yeah, those are good. But yeah. I slack on those movements because they're super boring.
You can make them fun, but, the result you see is just kind of how you feel in the midsection primarily. It doesn't, you don't get big or anything from it. That's why, like, a lot of bodybuilders will criticize that kind of stuff, because it's not conducive to their job, essentially.
Yeah.
But no, for example, I'm at a point right now, and people criticize this, but I don't give a shit. I don't deadlift conventionally anymore, unless I'm going to compete in a strongman event that has like an axle bar deadlift or a max effort deadlift of some sort.
But why do people give you shit? That's at the root of that. Why I made that post. It's like, why do people give you shit? You're a dude who's in amazing shape. You're probably stronger than most average dudes. You know what I'm saying? Like, why are they giving you shit?
It comes from of course, bias, and they're not experienced, right? They love doing it, and it's great. They're excited about it. It's you get on Twitter, it's like fitness Twitter is just deadlifts, bro, just deadlift, like shut up and deadlift kind of mentality. And it's kind of funny or whatever. And yeah, people should deadlift, right? You should get to a certain level of relative strength in the deadlift, I think, right? But man, it just fries me, right? If I go up to that near max effort and train frequently, weekly or bi-weekly, I get that deadlift hangover. I get that workout hangover. My next workout or two sucks, and like my body aches, and a 600-pound deadlift is not going to improve my life.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not a serious competitor. It's just something I like doing, and like throughout the winter when I'm like bigger and stronger than I typically tend to be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm hex bar. Sometimes I just do lighter straight leg deadlifts, that kind of stuff. Lately I've been doing a lot of single leg deadlifts with 100-pound kettlebell or something. I love that stuff, right? And you're getting those muscles a lot more effectively with those tools sometimes too.
Yeah,
right?
like a stiff-legged deadlift or an RDL is like, that's a great movement. And I would argue that for someone that's not focused on becoming as strong as possible, maybe they're focused solely on hypertrophy, those movements, I could argue that those movements are better. An RDL is probably better for muscle growth.
I know some super jacked bodybuilders that don't deadlift.
Mm-hmm. Like
right? And they've got
period. Do they not do any kind of?
Sorry, do like RDLs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Rear foot elevated single leg RDLs and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Their hamstrings and their glutes and their backs are thick, right? Yeah. But they're just like, man, I want to train 5 days a week and recover really well, and that fucks me up. Yeah. And then there's a lot of really experienced competitive, like elite level lifters that will even say, hey, I just keep my deadlift at like 315 to keep it going, but they don't go above that, even though they might be able to deadlift 700 or 800 pounds, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny talking about this today, because just yesterday I was telling my wife like this moral dilemma I kind of have. I'm 40, and I've gotten to a good level of strength that I'm happy with. And yeah, there's like a couple numbers I'd like to maybe just kind of hit, but I'm a little bit more about strength, or health and aesthetics at this point. And as long as I can maintain like a 405 squat, 315 bench, and just get lean and be super healthy, I'm happy, right? Mm-hmm. I don't need to go above 500 in those lifts again, just for fucking what, right? I'm not going and
no one really cares.
No one really cares. It's clout on social media, right? And me posting that on social media doesn't really help anybody, right? I like to get on social media to kind of bring some perspective and help people. Sometimes you brag, right? Just to be honest, but I don't need that. So, that might be a cop out. That might be like weak to some people, but the fact of the matter is I've been doing this for a long time, and I know what works best for me. And I like to feel good in between my workouts, and super heavy deadlifts, frequent deadlifts don't make me feel great.
I'm curious. Have you ever had any kind of chronic pain issues or injuries, nagging injuries?
Yeah, not a lot. I had a separated AC joint on both sides, but not at the same time. One was from jiu-jitsu. The other was just an incline bench. So that sucked. I couldn't press at all for like 4 months. I had an odd Sartorius strain, which is the longest muscle in the body. It goes from the hip to the inside of the knee on the shin. It's the longest muscle in the body, super thin. Mm. I don't know what happened. It just, in the bottom of the squat one day, just ping. And I just thought that was kind of weird. And then as days went on, I couldn't lift my leg without just feeling fire all the way down from the outside of my hip down and through my thigh inside. Funny story. I eventually went to a doctor. I was like, hey, I need some imaging. I don't know if I need surgery, because my leg would not function properly. And they sent me to a physiatrist. And
I don't even know what that is.
It's like a physiotherapist.
Oh, yeah.
I might have said that wrong. It's not a common thing. So this was in Portland. So just to paint the picture, Portland, Oregon. I go to this place, the medical facility, and the classic frumpy old lesbian looking doctor comes in, like with shitty hair and just kind of she fucking hated me and I hated her. And before we even talked, I was like,
yeah, she knew.
yeah. So she came and gave me these like medical shorts because she was going to examine me and test my strength levels and stuff and imbalances, which is I like that because it's something I used to do with clients in person. I only train people online now. But she comes back in after I changed. She goes, "How did you do this?" And I was squatting. She goes, "Squatting? Oh my God, you should never do that." And I was like, "Not even without load?" She's like, "No, it's so bad for your knees." I was like, you're helping people with like strength imbalances.
Yeah.
So I started challenging her a little bit. It's like, what about like babies that squat and children and have this ability to get into a beautiful full depth squat? Well, they're young, they can handle it. Okay. Well, how about like people in other countries that sit in a very deep squat just to hang out and talk to people and like smoke at a bus stop or like they work in a field? What about them? She goes, "Well, they live short, harsh lives." And I go, "Because they can squat the full depth?" And I showed her a full squat. I'm like, "Look, I have no pain here other than this strain that I have. Like my knees are fine, my back's fine." And she like had a panic shock. "Get up, don't do that. Be careful getting up." She was like trying to baby me.
Holy.
It was fucking weird, dude.
That's super weird. And she was a doctor.
She was a doctor. And then finally she goes, this is where the feminist bullshit came out. She goes, "Well, you're not going to listen to this because you're a man, but you should just do light yoga.
What?
Not anymore." And I was like, "You know what? Fuck this." And I left.
Yeah.
The worst part is I left in those stupid fucking medical shorts and I had to come back in and go, "I need to get my pants."
Holy shit. You should write a book. You got some stories.
Actually, I started cranking out 1,000 to 2,000 words a day. So I'm on it.
Yeah, I saw that, man. That's wicked. What like has that been in your head for a while?
Man, it's been in my head for a very long time, especially since I moved back to the States essentially as an adult. So quick short story. My mom's British, so I grew up half of my childhood in Britain, and I lived in Czech Republic for 11 years, and then toured the world. I've been to over 40 countries at this point, and mostly in a punk band. Some places I went to in Asian stuff by myself, yeah, I've got a lot of stories, lots of violent, dark stories, lots of just crazy, weird, wild stories. And people have always told me, especially since I moved here or moved to Portland, when was that, like 2009 or 10, that I should write a book. I'm like, why? It's just normal to me, right?
Well, that'd be a really interesting read.
It took me a minute to figure out how I can construct it, because it's not a story, it's a series of short stories. So I started kind of putting them into categories, like really like life-threatening, like situations that cause like PTSD and all that kind of stuff, to just weird, random stuff at like the Bulgarian-Turkish border, or like just weird stuff that happens when you're on the road as a punk band. So
yeah, no, that's cool, man. I like that. That's gonna be awesome. How long I think about writing a book, and it takes years, probably. Like what, 2 years you think it's going to take you? You have no idea? Or?
I don't know, because I'm doing some digging, and like just sometimes I'll crank out a story just telling someone. Like I like to host people, I like to like cook for people and stuff, and have people over, and then something will just remind me of a story. I'm like, man, I totally forgot that happened, and I'll just explain all the details. So when I kind of dig into those things, I'm like taking notes. And I can write a pretty vivid description of most things, but honestly, I don't know how long it'll take. But some of this stuff is taking some digging and like unearthing of some like kind of traumas, right? It's kind of weird. I got pretty emotional writing last night, just thinking about some of these things. Like, man, I almost fucking died, and I was like perfectly okay with it. Like, what the fuck is wrong with me, you know?
Cool, man. No, that's cool. I'm looking forward to that, dude. And you can do the whole thing. You can do like the Audible and all that stuff. That'd be wicked.
Yeah.
Like the audiobook, that'd be wicked.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another topic I want to jump into. We're already 50 minutes in, so I usually try to keep these around the 1 hour mark. I was talking to Jack Donovan, and we were talking about posting spicy memes and fear porn and stuff like that. And he was saying, like that stuff's not going to make a positive dent in the universe. And you had I made a post about that of like, I've dialed back that kind of like those rude posts and those obnoxious posts. And you said something, you commented something that stuck with me, that was promote what you love, not what you hate. And I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. You know, rather than illuminate the things I hate and be like, hey, look at this thing we should all be outraged by. Be like, hey, this is this thing we should do to make our lives better. That's like a way better approach. And so there's something that I've witnessed. I'm going to relate this to the fitness industry. Something I've witnessed in the fitness industry, fitness space, especially on YouTube, is fitness influencers. It's a stupid word, but you know what I'm talking about. Building brands on drama, natty or not videos, and talking shit about other coaches. And it is like, this relates to what you said, you know, the promote what you love, not what you hate. And I totally agree that there's a time and place to call out bullshit. But it's weird to me that these people are being like, these small YouTubers are saying stuff like, you know, they're attacking people with big followers. So, or a lot of followers. So say like, you know, Greg Doucette said this, blah, blah, blah. Then they make their video, they get all that attention. And it's like, well, is this coming from a genuine place? Or are they just using this outrage to like gather popularity? And my question to you is, how do coaches and fitness influencers call out bullshit respectfully without resorting to, you know, personal attacks? Or do you think that sometimes you just need to lay it out?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, well, first of all publicity is good publicity. So if you're just complaining about, you know, the pandemic constantly and the Biden regime or whatever, you're giving it publicity, right? And we're all aware of it. Like I've posted plenty about it and just kind of like, this doesn't serve me or anyone else. It's not productive. We all know about it. It would be a lot better to be just kind of positive and help people kind of get out of this funk that everyone's pissed off about, right?
Yeah.
But you know, and you know what? I do a lot of disruptive marketing, right? I throw rocks at a lot of bullshit, like fad diets and like pyramid schemes and even some more of some of the later influencers who have become pretty popular, that are just full of arbitrary bullshit.
We shall use no names, but he who eats organ meats and
yeah. I mean, you know, that guy at first, first saw him like, dude, this is awesome, right? This is like he's got like the healthy stuff down and he's jacked, and then man, just following like, oh god, like this information is not factual at all.
There's a part of me that watches it, and I'm like obviously aware of what's going on there. And I'm like, okay, well, is this guy a net negative or a net positive? And I think to myself, I'm like, well, like he works out, he gets out in the sun. He promotes certain things that are a little fucking crazy. And it's like, is his marketing deceptive? Absolutely. But is he doing harm? I don't know if I can say that. So there's a part of me that's like, I don't like all this is stuff that I think about all the time. And I'm just kind of curious, like how, you know, how do we inspire people with valuable content and still illuminate the quackery? Because even with your posts, you'll make fun of like low carb zealots and stuff like that. But I don't really see you like posting a lot of people's names. Like I don't see you go, hey, this guy's stupid, because it's more of just like the idea, right? Like you don't need to be low carb, right? You don't need to do that. You don't need to fast. You don't like you attack ideas without attacking people.
Right. And also, you know, give the information like, hey, you could do this. There's nothing wrong with doing it. Just know that it is not the only way. And the reasons that works for you is X, Y, and Z, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, the King guy, you know, I don't think he's causing harm. And I'll be honest, like when he came out with the obviously not came out with, but the tenets of health, he had like a bind room for sleep and eat and train and all this stuff. I'm like, motherfucker, why didn't I think of that? I've been talking about that shit for like 10 years. Like, oh, such a good idea. But you know, there's some things that are like probably not very good, like slamming like 50 egg yolks and telling people to do that, and then saying, hey, your ancestors didn't give a shit about their cholesterol. It's like, dude, your fucking ancestors had no idea what cholesterol fucking was, right? And look, saturated fat's good for you, but more is not always better. And some people have issues. I'm one of these people. If I eat too much saturated fat, and I've tested this 3 times, if I have a high fat, especially saturated fat diet, my lipids are fucked. Right?
Yeah, we kind of got into that on Instagram. I actually got my lipids checked out because I eat high fat. I would say I eat a lot of saturated fat, and my lipids are optimal. I don't know if that's going to change when I get older, but
you know what? Sorry, go ahead.
Some people, that's the whole thing. Like my whole thing with the saturated fat thing is I think we got to a point where like saturated fat is the best thing in the world for you. Eat butter in your, drink butter in your coffee, blah, blah, blah. It's a superfood. And then it's like, okay, like maybe it's not a superfood, but I don't necessarily think that it's dangerous for everyone. And like I said, like, yeah, there's studies showing that it's bad, and then some studies showing it's not. And I did go through that stuff that you sent me. So the ones that, we were talking about like research and like the observational studies, those are the ones that I have a hard time with, because it's like, there's so many other factors that are at play where I'm like, well, what happens if you eat high fat, but you're also eating lots of vegetables and lots of fiber and exercising? But then there is studies showing that people in a laboratory setting were getting more LDL cholesterol and stuff like that.
But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Many years ago, I did the keto thing, the paleo thing, and my lipids were fine. But I was also 28, 29, 30 years old. And as I got older, my lipids just weren't responding to that good at all. Right. So, pay attention, bring my fats down. And look, I'm not like a low fat, unless I'm on a cut, I go pretty low fat then. But like currently, fat intake is probably 20% of my diet, maybe 25. Right. So it's not low. But the whole call out culture, natty or not, it's just this low T, like bitchy culture, right?
Yeah.
The thing is that they get a lot of clout for it, and they create this like attention. And he said that it's just high school bullshit, right?
Yeah. And it makes me not, even if someone has a lot of value to offer, I kind of get turned off by their content. I'm like, like even if they have good shit to say, I just don't like how they're saying it.
Right. Just imagine meeting that person in person. Like if you see him like every day, they're calling someone out, and like it's just that SJW like kind of like behavior, right? And I get that in my DMs, dude. I had to like turn off the ability for people to respond to my stories.
Yeah, you're too famous.
I don't think so, man. I don't have a whole lot of followers, but say something and it's just bitchy commentary.
Well, actually, the peer review,
right? And it's like, look, I'll have a conversation with you about something, but here's the honest truth. I'm here to work. I'm using social media as a tool to get through to people and get clients, right? And I have fun on it. I talk to people, I help people regardless, right? It's not like, hey, you're not going to pay me, I won't talk to you. That's not what I'm saying. But it's like, dude, I could get into this and debate this with you for weeks and get fucking nowhere. Yeah. And I could also, like, just to totally smash your stupid ideology, I could pull up like 10 studies to prove that you're wrong, but I'm not going to spend the time to do that because I've got shit to do. Fuck off, right? Yeah. But the meme thing, I wanted to say one thing because Jack's a smart guy. I love him. He's a good friend. But I had a good conversation with a friend of mine named Scott, and we were talking about the whole meme thing. I love memes, dude. Like memes.
I love memes too. So
yeah, you don't want to turn into this meme lord, right? Yeah. But there's some good fucking memes out there. We're like, shit. Well, here's the thing. People aren't reading books a whole lot, right? And if we can condense this idea with a visual, which is a really good way to learn, a visual, and most people are visual learners, right? You can condense this idea into a visual, a meme with maybe a bit of humor or like a really good point. That's people are learning from those things, right? Mm-hmm. Is it a good idea to get educated by memes? Not really, but there's some really good points out there that like point things. Like, and if you just think that it's not like an attack on, the government or like certain people, but maybe just explanation like in fitness or nutrition, that's a condensed PowerPoint, right?
Mhm.
I
And
don't,
also
I don't mean,
it's a neutral technology. You
Mhm.
could think of it as a neutral technology too.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure. Yeah.
it's just a bite-sized piece of information. That's all. The definition of a meme is just a short, bite-sized piece of information. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, shitty. But yeah, no, that's a good point. Because I still look at memes, I laugh to myself, and I'm like, dude, that's perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just kind of you gotta pick and choose and not come across these accounts that are anonymous people and they're just memeing to the moon and back. It gets a little
Yeah.
old after
You
a
know
while.
who's the best at memes is Dr. Steven Nadolsky.
Oh yeah, I've seen some of his memes. They're
Man,
pretty
his
funny.
are perfect. And they're not political at all. It's all nutrition and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, it's kind of attacking, it's throwing rocks at, diet zealots and stuff like that. But yeah, his are great. So I like
Yeah.
memes, man. It's just important not to get too caught up in them and like do some actual reading and studying stuff too, get some real world experience.
Absolutely, man. Are you still good to talk off air for a little bit today? Do you have a bit of time
Yeah,
after this?
sure.
Cool, man. Well, just to wrap this up, for those who feel like they're just too far gone because you didn't really start taking care of your health. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Like were you 300 pounds when you were 28? Like you were still pretty.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was
So
300 pounds 12 years ago.
and then you got, a lot of people are comparing themselves. You see these influencers on Instagram, they're 20 years old, just sliced and diced. And a lot of people might feel like they're too far gone, or they've spent, too much of their lives treating their bodies like shit. And they feel like, oh, what's the point? I'm already at this, like, too far gone to actually make a change. And I'm just like, what words of encouragement would you offer to them? Because you are qualified to speak on this. And I can only imagine, someone who's made such a insane transformation, the amount of, not just physical challenge, but mental challenge. Like, did you have a lot of times where you felt like self-sabotaging and you felt like quitting? And I'm kind of curious, like, what words of encouragement would you offer people who are maybe relating to your story, and how did you avoid giving up?
First of all, no matter who you are and where you're at, you still have those words of, kind of like doubt, right? Imposter syndrome is a real thing. But to, to use buzzwords like self-awareness is powerful, right? I like the term awareness precedes change, right? You can't change what you're not fully aware of. So in terms of myself, I was just kind of like, well, how should I eat? What program should I do? Like, what diet should I do? What routine should I do? Right? No digging, no self-awareness. Just give me the black and white answer and I'll do the thing. And then I'll look and feel like that person. Right. Well, lo and behold, that didn't work. And I didn't really start finding results until, of course, I got educated and hired a coach myself. But mostly what it was this self-reflection and lots of digging, because ultimately this does come down to a mindset. So we kind of go on to like autopilot, right? Just like a default mode. And we all have these kind of narratives that we tell ourselves and get caught up in, and they just become the norm. So therefore we think that they're just the reality, right? Like I can't, it's too late. I'm 40, I can't get into shape at my age or whatever. But it's important to stop and identify those stories you're telling yourself and ask yourself, A, where do they come from? Right? Find the root of those stories. And B, are they serving you any good purpose? Right? Because a lot of times, if you stop and try that, you will find that you're feeding yourself a ton of bullshit every day. We all do it. I catch myself in thought patterns today where I'm like, why am I thinking about this? This serves no fucking purpose, right? We're bombarded with information every day. And a lot of this comes from like previous lifestyles or even childhood. I always say, I've been saying this for years, beware of the narratives you feed yourself. If you are what you eat, then beware of the narratives you feed yourself, right? Because they do become reality. I'll give you an example. I mentioned growing up in a British household. So my little English mum, she would leave me sweeties on my bed when I had like a rough day at school or something. I got picked on for being a fat kid, or I came home upset about something. I've been in a fight, came home with a bloody nose or something. I would get candy from her, right? Or if I did good, she would reward me with going to, get ice cream or McDonald's or something like that, right? On the other side, my dad, if I didn't do so good, it wasn't so frequent, but occasionally he would just kind of punish me with like some sort of manual labor, right? Go mow the lawn or something like that. So, that's normal, I think, for a lot of kids. But you have to stop and think, how does that translate to people's like health and relationship to food and exercise later in life, right? I discovered after trying like all these diets and all these programs that those things kind of led me to think that I deserved some shit food for having a bad day, or I deserved it for having like doing really good with something. And then I also associated like exercise as a form of punishment. Like I don't really want to do it. I have to do it. That sucks. When in reality, I could do it. I got to do it, right? Instead of I have to do it. So I would encourage anyone who is struggling to lose weight or take charge of their health to not go too extreme, and don't try and just gun it to the deadline. There's no deadline with this, right? You have to work towards perfection, but just know that within nutrition and training, there's no perfection. What you really want to prioritize is consistency. And a prerequisite to consistency are sustainable approaches and realistic expectations, right? So if you don't have an approach that works for you and your lifestyle, you're not going to stick to it for very long. If it's too extreme, you're not going to stick to it for very long. If you think that some 30-day program that your favorite celebrity did to get shredded and jacked for a movie is going to get you to look like that, that's not a realistic expectation, right? So those things, and then also what I mentioned, do some digging on your narratives, catch thought patterns and question where they come from and how they're serving you, because odds are you'll find that most of them aren't serving you, and some of them come back to some old emotional tie. So that would be my advice to anyone who's struggling to get started or struggling to continue to move forward.
Hell yeah, man. I appreciate that. That's a good place to wrap this up. Thank you very much for coming on. If you could just let people know where they can find you, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to do a shameless plug in too is on that note of testosterone. So since we kicked this off.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe by the time this comes out, I'm not sure. I should have it in a couple of days. I just got to kind of connect some links. I just wrote another free ebook on proven testosterone boosting supplements, right? So to be clear, you don't want to rely on those too much. You still have to do other lifestyle factors and stuff, but that will be coming out shortly. So maybe if that comes out before you put this
absolutely.
podcast, you put the link in. It's a short read. And then in terms of finding me, links to me will be in that. I'm on Instagram, Ethan Buck, and that's iron_will_PT, and same as on Twitter.
Sweet, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, likewise. It's a pleasure. The first round was awesome, and being on your podcast the second time is a pleasure. You've had some good names on here lately too.
I've been
kicking ass. Elliot Holst, Jack Donovan, and those guys. So I appreciate
working on it.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.